Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome everyone into Garden of Doom, and this week we are joined by Mark Booth. He is the author of the New York Times bestseller, The Secret History of the World. I strongly recommend everyone read it, or if you don't want to read it, it is available on Audible, which is not a sponsor of this show, so don't worry. I wish it was, believe me, I wish it was. But it's available, and it's comes with a membership, which is amazing. So, Mark, thank you so much for joining the show, and you can tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you for inviting me. You cover an amazing range of topics on your shows, and I've listened to a few, and I think they're amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And something I wanted to ask though was, why do you call it the Garden of Doom?
Oh, so way back when the show first started, and longtime listeners have heard this story too many times, so I'm going to give the fast version. I was actually recruited to do a podcast by another podcaster who knew me from, believe it or not, the pro wrestling world. And it was right around when COVID was starting to hit and everything was sort of going to hell, and, everybody was sort of stuck indoors, and he had developed this new hobby, which he took to immediately, and he was really great at it, and it was gardening. So every day he was posting pictures on Facebook of all these great eggplants and tomatoes and this, that, and the other thing he was growing in his garden, which he had only started gardening like 2 months earlier. And so we're like, what's the name of the show? What are we doing? Well, you're gardening a lot. And immediately, of course, I'm Mr. Doom and Gloom. So immediately went to Garden of Doom, which seemed to have a fun little Garden of Eden kind of theme. So we both agreed to that. And
excellent. So you're Mr. Doom and Gloom.
You know what? I think we both sort of are. I mean, he's gone on to do another, obviously he left around episode, 18 or whatever, but he's gone on. I think we're both sort of doom and gloom, just our interests in doom are different.
I thought it might be, because normally you think of the Garden of Eden or the Garden of Paradise, so I thought it might be a twist on that. Because I know that, there are millions and millions of people in the world who believe that we're entering the end times, and I thought there might be some kind of resonance of that, but we could get onto that.
There is.
We could get onto that topic later
There is a little of that in the acronym. Well, not in that in the name, but also the acronym of God. That was accidental, but I think, I'm not sure it was entirely an accident, either subliminally or directed by others. But anyway.
Well, we could get onto the question of the Antichrist. You've got good defamation insurance.
I have no defamation insurance, but I'm judgment-proof. I own nothing in my own name, and my only asset of any significance is a qualified retirement plan. So there we go. So so what's your origin story? Because just to tell the folks, I mean, you preface it by saying that you had studied for 33 years, which is also, I'm sure, not a coincidence. But you don't start at the story that I studied for 33 years. You start at what got you on the path to even studying for the first 3 months.
Yes. Oh, well, I mean, it started pretty early with me. So I was born Mark Booth, and when my literary agent was submitting the book, I asked him to submit it under the name Jonathan Black, because at that time I worked in publishing, and I thought that my colleagues might think I was a nutter. And that is why in the UK and in foreign language territories around the world, I'm Jonathan Black, and the only kind of online stuff I do on X, Twitter, is J Black Author. Just to clear that up. But I was born in 1955 in Cambridge, and quite early on I started having mystical experiences, and I remember being in my bedroom when I think I was about 10 or 11, and I was suddenly, my whole being was filled with light, and these texts and images seemed to be downloading into my brain, and I hastily grabbed a school exercise book and began to transcribe this stuff as quickly as I could, and there were various other things happened, and so I was left trying to square those sorts of experiences with the everyday tying up my shoelaces, putting on my school uniform, going to school to conjugate Latin verbs and play rugby, I must admit, rather wheezily. And then I suppose that's why I chose to read philosophy and theology at university, because I was still trying to reconcile these two different modes of thought, and the problem was that the philosophy ate up all the theology.
Right.
I had my philosophy tutor, who was called Jonathan Barnes, was often talked about as the cleverest man in Oxford, and he was a kind of outrider for the Richard Dawkins school of atheism. And he taught that not only are all the claims of religions false, but the language used to express those claims is completely meaningless. And I found that quite painful, I suppose. But at the same time, I was finding organized religion quite hard too. Right. The Church of England is very kind of wishy-washy. It seemed to be compromising all the time. It doesn't like any suggestion of the supernatural.
Right.
And sometimes it seems as if it's not really trying to say anything about the world at all.
Yeah.
It's just poetic language. And also theology, well, if you're trying to make sense of a notion like the Trinity, you'll end up tying yourself up in ludicrous knots. And so it was because of kind of disillusionment with organized religion and particularly theology that I kind of developed this interest in the secret stuff, in esoterica, in alchemy and theosophy and Freemasonry and Rosicruxianism. And one of the things that appealed to me about that was that unlike some of the organized religions, particularly what they call the religions of the book, there was no claim to exclusivity here.
Yeah.
These streams of thought were trying to find out what is universally true. And I thought that was fascinating because if all these traditions around the world agree that something is true, that doesn't prove it to be true, but it does make it more likely.
Yes.
And it's also talking about a universal experience. So I was thinking these high-flown thoughts, and then I left college, and I found that a degree in philosophy and theology guarantees you one thing in life, and that is that you will be utterly and completely unemployable. So I went abroad for a bit. I taught English as a foreign language in Italy, and I came back and I got a job working in a bookshop at the start of a chain which was just starting up, called Waterstones, which eventually became very big. And I was very lucky because Tim Waterstone said to me, if you do me a proposal for a publishing list that I like, I'll finance it. And so that's how I got started. And later I joined the company which would become Random House UK, and I started off as an editorial director and then publisher of the commercial hardback list. And so I was having a great time publishing not only novelists and historians, but rock stars and comedians and actors and special forces soldiers and four-star generals and poets and artists, and that was really good for me because it was taking me out of this little narrow area of interest, which was sort of bordering on an obsession, and so those were the kind of books that my bosses wanted me to publish, but when they weren't looking, I was still trying to slip in books on esoteric and alternative subjects, and then in the 90s, something surprising happened, which is that books by Graham Hancock and Robert Bauval and Knight and Lomas and really the kind of big daddy of them all, Robert Temple, started to become bestsellers, and they were bombing up and down the bestseller charts, and so I just So it was Robert who introduced us, was it? How do you know Robert?
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a good time to give a thank you publicly to Professor Robert Temple. He has been on the show. How do I know him? Sort of the same way he introduced us, but basically I heard him on another podcast, probably Earth Ancients, but not necessarily. And I just reached out to him and he responded and he came on the show and, much to probably his surprise and much to my delight, he enjoyed his experience on the show. He's promised to come back. We haven't figured it out yet, but I gave him sort of a homework assignment, which was a little bit out of his wheelhouse, but he agreed to take it on. Hopefully he will. But he introduced us. And, when I heard his name referenced twice in the book, and this has happened a couple times where I've come across people I've heard guesting on other shows before and reached out to them, where they're teaching the great courses or whatnot. And they've said yes. And, it's great. But yeah, Robert wrote the Serious Question. I believe that's the name of his bestseller. It's a Serious Mystery.
In fact, the Serious Mystery was the first of those kind of alternative history books, I think. Hancock and Bobal and
Von Daniken, Sitchin.
Were kind of influenced by him, and he used to. I mean, did you know when he was younger, he could divide 7-figure numbers by 7-figure numbers in his head.
Wow, that's crazy.
I mean, and he speaks several dead languages. I mean, he's just quite brainy, really.
Yeah, no, he was a university professor in China as well as English-speaking countries. It's truly amazing, and we didn't even speak about the Serious Question or mystery in depth on the show. We talked about his discovery of plasma, which to those of you out there wondering what plasma is, it's not what the EMTs give you or they give you in transit. It's basically dark matter. And so if you've never heard plasma as a fourth state of matter, look it up there. It's the fourth state of matter, and it's basically dark matter. So my New Yorker's coming out, dark matter with an R at the end. But yeah, so that was that. But you do a wonderful job, and whoever picked the person to narrate the book, they did a wonderful job too, because he's a wonderful speaker and reader. But you do a wonderful job of reconciling, threading, and sort of getting a synopsis of all the major philosophies, but to a certain extent chronologically as they occur in time, why they came in those times, and how they are associated with certain figures in history and or mythology and certain celestial signs, and to help it all make sense, because people, the Trinity, people think that the Trinity is a Christian invention, and this particular version of the Trinity is, but it really isn't. I mean, most mythologies had sort of your primordial universe being who gave birth to the original Sky Father, who didn't particularly care about the humans, but their son, the third generation, did. Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. There's usually some usurpation of a father and or a grandfather. But Odin had two brothers. Zeus had two brothers. I mean, there's, but even going into, the Brahma and the Vedic traditions, someone pointed out that Brahma had a wife basically named basically, if you take Brahma and move it around, it's Abraham or Abram, and his consort was someone named Sarah, who more or less.
I haven't heard that. Wow.
There's this, and there's so much in there, and like just the Old Testament is so replete with, I guess, if you want to be trite, plot holes. If you don't want to be trite, inconsistencies that sort of need to be reconciled. Even the order of what God did on the first 6 days or 7 days is different in chapter 1 and chapter 2, like the actual order of creation. And I guess that's why the Talmudic scholars spend, hundreds of hours and thousands of years trying to write the extra books. But anyway, enough of me talking. We want to hear.
Well, no, I think that was a brilliant and very kind exposition. I mean, I think that the answer to the question, what do all these traditions from the world, from around the world, have in common? The key to the narrative is idealism, that what all spiritual traditions have in common is the belief that mind came before matter and is more real than it. And what is more real, mind or matter, is the most important question in philosophy. All the other questions of philosophy can't spin out of that one. And we live in a time when I think if we asked most people in the West what is more real, mind or matter, they would say, well, of course, it's matter. You know, if I have an image of a tree in my mind, it's because I've seen a material tree, a physical tree. And I've written this book partly to try to show that I think that we've been brainwashed into this materialism, and that for most of people throughout most of history, the equally obvious answer was that mind comes first.
Right.
And so in writing the book, I'm trying to induce an idealism mindset into people, and the whole narrative of the secret history of the world derives from the fact that, according to spiritual traditions, human beings were originally immaterial spiritual beings, sometimes called sparks of God, and they fell into matter. This is in Christianity, this doctrine is called the capital F fall. And sometimes people imagine this as spirit falling into matter which is already fully formed and solid. In fact, I think that if you look at the tradition more closely, what it's showing is that as humans fell, matter solidified around them. And in particular, that spiritual spark became encased in a physical body, in a fleshly body.
Yeah, you sort of had, and I don't think you ever phrase it this way, but if you listen to the whole book, and I listened the second time this week just to prepare myself for this, and I, so much more, made sense this time around. I think your trinity is sort of mineral, animal, vegetable, and that humans sort of started as mineral. Basically, men came from clay, but it seems like is basically survival based. Then animal seems like it became more hunting, wanting more, gaining empire, gaining power, gaining status, and vegetable is more in tune with the earth and spiritual, and gaining that way, elevating yourself spiritually, and not being like a vegetable, like you can't think, or a piece of asparagus, but that you are more, man and earth are more in harmony. That's sort of what I got from it. Is that, or that's the goal? That's the
yes. I think that's broadly right. I mean, I suppose that these traditions are saying that we have four parts to our being. One is this spiritual spark, sometimes called the spirit. Then we have a vegetable part, sometimes called the life body or the etheric body, which is what animates matter. And then we have an animal part of ourselves, which gives us the capacity for for self-consciousness. It's what animals have, and then we have the physical body, and we have become enclosed by these different bodies. And the reason for this, the reason for the fall was always intended. The reason for the fall was that we would be cut off from God and emanations from gods like the lower gods, the angels, the different orders of angels, and the spirits. We would be not completely cut off, but they would be filtered out. Because as long as they weren't filtered out, as long as we were completely open to them, we would be completely overwhelmed.
Right. We
would have no free will. We would know exactly and very forcibly what we ought to do next. So we would not, without the fall, we would not have been able to develop free will or free thought.
I have a question for you on something that I didn't quite catch the connection to. Because we started with, I mean, you do an excellent job on why the days of the week are the days of the week, the celestial bodies that they are associated with, and the why. Those are the celestial bodies and the order of the days. And, you know, it very much takes like a Hebrew or Islamic or Seventh-day Adventist, where Saturday is the first day of the week, where, now it makes sense why maybe the Christians changed it to Sunday being the first day of the week, because at some point Saturn, who I guess is ironically associated with Uranus, the primordial heavens, was also became also associated with Satan, and I missed the connection of Saturn to Satan, and of course part of my confusion is because I'm so geared towards thinking of Lucifer being Mercury, the morning star, and Lucifer being Satan. But I mean, I've never seen the connection between Lucifer and Satan. They both seem to be names that were made up to be, even in those disciplines, like in Judaism, Satan wasn't the top bad guy, and in the Book of Enoch, Satan was just but one of the seven princes. And now I guess the name doesn't matter so much as to what their actual role is, and you might as well give them a name. But when did Saturn become associated with Satan, if you know?
Well, I don't know when that happened, but I do know it's a very ancient tradition, and it reflects a tradition that says that our lives were always intended to be hard in two ways, and they were supposed to be hard in the sense of being tough and difficult and requiring struggle and the exercise of will.
The old Buddhist life of suffering.
Yeah. So our fall into matter meant that life had to be hard in that sense to help us develop these capacities, which we are developing. But life was also hard in the sense of being hard to understand. And Lucifer represents that principle. Lucifer dazzles us and leads to some very curious aspects of the human condition, such as the fact that we commonly say that heaven lies the other side of hell.
Mm-hmm.
Why is life constructed that in order to get to the greatest happiness, we have to go through the greatest unhappiness? Why should that be? There's nothing in science which explains why science has to be like that. Why is it that it often happens in life, that the thing we most ought to do looks very, very, very similar to the thing we most ought not to do.
Well,
there is a tricky quality in the human condition, and in the kind of esoteric traditions, these two aspects of life's hardness are denoted by the Saturnine and the Luciferic.
Yeah, I noticed one thing that you made very clear is that a lot of the esoteric groups, whether it's the Hermetics, the Gnostics, the Cathars, the Templars, the Masons, the Rosicruxians, first of all, they're not all over the same time, but a lot of them believe the same thing, but they try to sort of maybe shoehorn it or retrofit into what their view is. One, some view it is very Catholic or a different kind of Christian. Others will view it, Kabbalah, the Jewish way, Sufism with Islam, Gnostic, something entirely different. But it's basically the same thoughts and ideas. I mean, the rituals change, but they resemble each other. I was struck a few months ago when I went to a bar mitzvah one month and a Catholic wedding one month, or in the same month, and how the rituals and the shapes of the buildings and where things were almost identical, except instead of where the Torahs were, you'd have, the giant stained glass. But I have this theory on the same thing. And it definitely occurred somewhere after, around where Constantine, or after Constantine I converted the Roman Empire to Christianity. But you are the one that inspired me to this, because you put a pregnant seed in my head, and then and I thought of it quasi-independently in between. And then when I listened to the book this week, I'm like, well, this is where I got this from. I mean, Mark Booth, put this in my head. I just didn't remember it. But the comparison between Job and Hercules, and I don't know that anybody would normally put those things, but both these guys were put through torments and hells, just basically to test their faith and go through torment. One, was the heroic Greek version of the ultimate strength. The other was sort of the Jewish version of the pastoral scholar, the family man kind of thing. But it's the same thing. And because Satan was the one who tested Job, maybe that became the ultimate evil. But because of this, I'm doing another show at the end of the month with it's called Garden of the Superior, because my co-host in that show, her name is C the Superior for those purposes, and it's on I'm going to do on Hercules. And I wanted to see, because I thought it, but then you said it, and of course I heard you say it once before, or the narrator anyway, speaking your words, that the 12 tasks of Hercules are working their way through the zodiac. And obviously the Nemean lion is pretty obvious there, but I don't want you to help me, because I want to go through those myself and figure those out. But that brings me into so much is tied to the zodiac and to celestial signs, and science and astronomy and astrology weren't that different until, the last couple hundred years, if that. And astrology gets a bad rap. But you had said that, when let's just say the first guy, Uranus, made himself aware, or his son came, that was the age of Aries. And then when I guess it would have been Kronos' son came, that was the age of Aries. And then when the Jesus comes, that's the age of Pisces. And then when the Holy Spirit comes, I guess when Horoscope joins Ra forever, that's the age of Aquarius. And I think that ties exactly into your trinity of mineral, animal, vegetable, which is sort of why the zodiac comes in. But since so many people know the zodiac and zodiacs, that's part of it. Am I getting that a little bit right?
Yeah, no, very much so. I mean, I think that the identification of the sun, the moon, and the planets with great spiritual beings is a huge mystery, but it is something that's constant throughout all the traditions. And what happens in the history of the universe, according to these traditions, is that the great cosmic mind, who might be called God in some traditions, the capital S self in others, he creates the world by a series of emanations, starting with very great spiritual beings in Judaism and Christianity. They're called the seraphim and the cherubim, and these greater emanations help in the process of producing lesser spiritual beings. And you get to the beings which are identified with the sun, the moon, and the planets. And I think that these are pretty well universal in mythology, and that I think what we're being asked to consider, the only way to make sense of this, is to think of the material bodies in the sky as being, in some sense, the physical bodies of these beings, just as our meat bodies are the physical bodies of our spirit.
So before we get into things that are maybe more curious and trivial, I mean, it seems to me that the people are talking about revelations and end of times, and listen, the end has always been nigh. That used to be a joke, but now everyone says the end is nigh. But it should be that the most spiritual people, the most devout people, should actually be going into the age of Aquarius, where it's more about spirit rather than, we must take back this land for liberty and we must fight to the death. I mean, it seems like it seems like it's perverted just like when people say you're sheep, it's like an insult now to call somebody a sheep. But wasn't the basis of Christianity that we were supposed to be a flock and Jesus was the lamb and we were supposed to be peaceful and love your neighbor and all that? That's all looked upon by some of the most, I don't even want to say extreme, but some elements of religious groups. It seems like we went backwards at some point, and not just Christianity. I mean, Islam is also Islam means submission. I mean, that's what the word means. It's the religions have turned into, religions of conversion or else, as opposed to listen to our message, listen to the spirit, and that's sort of what's broken. Not that, I don't know, there's some cabal ruling the entire world and the elites are taking advantage of the poor. I mean, elites have always taken advantage of the poor. I mean, that's nothing new. I mean, you think the difference between Elon Musk and me is probably less, despite his dollar worth, than the average, blacksmith and the King of England in feudal times.
Yeah, I guess I think that's probably a good analogy. Well, I think that the reason we're in this very dark and difficult place, and the reason why it feels so doomy, I think the seeds of that came in the 17th century with the invention of the scientific method by Francis Bacon, and that was then taken up by Isaac Newton. And they realized that if you look at what's happening in the world as objectively as possible, and you try to take out all your prejudices and wishes and all the subjective elements, if you look as objectively as you can, you will make a lot of progress very quickly determining how the world works. And that is what happened. Hard on the heels of the scientific revolution came the Industrial Revolution, and that transformed the world, and it made all our lives much easier and healthier and safer and ultimately more leisured than they had ever been before. And only a fool would say that was wrong. But it came at a cost, this privileging of objective information, because it began to affect people's philosophy of life, because people came to understand the whole universe as running like the machines, like the steam engines that were being created by the Industrial Revolution. They came to understand the universe as being entirely mechanical and entirely material and entirely deterministic. And in that vision of the universe, not only was there no need for God to intervene and move things about, there was actually no room for God at all. And it took a long time for these ideas to kind of filter down from the scientists of the Royal Institution and elsewhere to the general public. But really, by the end of the 19th century, the West was becoming more and more secular. And this caused what Carl Gustav Jung called the spiritual crisis of modern man, because if you wanted to try and believe in the miraculous or the spiritual, you were, in terms of the framing intellectual system of the time, trying to believe something that was completely impossible.
Okay.
And if you said you believed that, you were either deluded or lying.
So okay, I'm sorry, finish up.
No, go on.
Well, I was thinking, because it seems like, and listen, science and secularism hasn't helped, because like any movement, it says that, says science. It says we've killed God. There is no God. Like, atheism and science sort of go hand in hand. But but instead of looking at science and knowledge as part of the gift that God or gods gave us, it's caused, well, to prove a scientific theory, it's proved the equal and opposite reaction, and that people have turned only to God, but their versions of God, which are at odds with each other and everybody else. And that's probably an oversimplification, but that's the crisis point right there.
Yeah, no, I think that is the crisis, and it's been deepening, and there have been spectacular new outgrowths of religion, but it's been stupid religion which denies science.
Yeah.
I think that the way round it, the way to oppose it, is to look at some of the things that the secret traditions are proposing. And I think that what they are proposing is that a lot of us have experiences which are impossible in terms of materialistic science. I mentioned my experience in childhood.
Yep.
I've had others. You probably had some.
I've had one.
Do you want to say?
Well, I've said it on those shows with people, but it's basically, it's maybe believe in ghosts or some type of ghost.
Yes.
In my case, it was a benevolent ghost. And it really wasn't for me. I was sort of a witness on the outside, but people who have listened to the show before have heard it. And if you haven't yet, you'll hear it again, because I discussed it with a guest, but I haven't dropped that show yet. So if you're a new listener, fear not, you'll hear the story.
But I think in addition to those more spectacular events, I believe that we all experience almost every day things which, if we are attentive to them, we will realize are impossible if materialism and scientism are accurate. I think that, if we attend to the subtle shifts and shades of our inner life, if instead of trying to look at life as objectively as possible, we try to look at it as subjectively as possible, I think we will acknowledge that we all, or most of us, experience little prompts, little premonitions. I think that I think that we all probably, I have this kind of private theory, this is not the part of the traditions, but I think that we all have a little esoteric superpower. Yeah. And if I tell you mine, well, you tell me what you think yours is.
Yeah, if I think I have one, but sure.
Okay. Well, I think I read minds. Not all the time, but I think that I often have a very strong, accurate intuition of what other people are thinking. Or it may just be, I was having lunch with a very senior scientist the other day. We were in a wine bar, and I made some claim about science. I didn't know what I was talking about, but I could hear his mind go click, because he was disagreeing. He didn't want to say so, but I knew he was disagreeing. But I kind of felt that click in his mind. And I suspect some of this, it might be premonitions, it might be meaningful dreams.
I think that mine might be that I'm very good at ascertaining what people's motivations are quickly, right. And in turn, I have sort of a spider sense, so to speak, as to if somebody doesn't like me immediately and that will never change, or if somebody likes me immediately and they probably like me immediately too much. Anything in the middle, I would say I don't have. So it would take something extreme. On the science thing, it's so weird because while you were talking, I was thinking about just something trivial yesterday. I went to the zoo. We went to the zoo, me, my wife, my stepson, and I'm sitting there looking at a grizzly bear and lion and rhinoceros, and how it's like the size of not a minivan, like a van, but bigger and stronger. And how we as humans were able to fulfill, what we were told to do, sort of, in Genesis. Not exactly. We were supposed to husband the earth, but we were also told to rule it. So, that's where interpretations, but that's not it. That there's no way we could have subjugated those beasts and even larger beasts that existed without science. The gun. Don't tell me spears and it is the rifle that did it, and that was pro-science, and at some point that turned. I mean, there is a religion, especially here in the United States, about the gun, and I don't say that with judgment. I own long arms. I own, I mean, I'm a true American. I've got mine, but but science created those things. But I want to get into something that I don't know if it's trivial or not, but you said a couple things. So I've done a few shows on Halloween and Samhain and is something to do, and because it's all over the world, it's not just because it's the harvest and it's sort of the thin veil between the dead and the not dead, and some theories about Sagittarius is in a certain position. But you had said that it actually commemorates the day that Noah, or whichever cognate of Noah, grounded, and the floods receded, and you could see that there was nobody else there, and that man returned back to clay, and it's a memorial of the Day of the Dead. Who figured out, or how do they know that is tied to what is our modern day of October 31st?
Oh, well, that's because it's an astronomical event, and it's the beginning of winter, and I think that something which I don't give an awful lot of space to in the book.
No, not a lot.
But which I think is very important. And I don't give a lot of space to it, partly because when I started doing Twitter and stuff, I noticed that if I posted anything dark, it immediately got a huge reaction.
Right.
And I thought, well, actually that's quite unhealthy, because we're naturally very fascinated by the dark side, and we have to be aware of it and know that it's there. But I think that there's a risk of dwelling on it too much in terms of letting things in. I think that as well as our having this very intimate relationship with unembodied beings, that is to say, beings which are emanations from God, which have never been embodied, we also have a very intimate relationship with the spirits of the dead. And I think that they are all around us all the time, and that the spirits of in my case, my parents, are often around. I think they can come for a very short time to tell us, to prompt us, to tell us things. I think that if you have a relative you are very fond of who has died, and you want to know what they're trying to tell you, try to remember the last time that they came into your head, and then try to remember what the thing was you were thinking just before that happened.
You have to be always present in your own mind. Is sort of, I guess that's sort of the training of the esoteric schools, is to always be present of your mind at all, not just let the thoughts guide you, but you need to be also, part of your brain needs to be thinking about what you're thinking.
Yes, and I think that we tend to have, because one of the kind of effects of being encased in this material body is that we have quite a narrow and fixed understanding of our own identity.
Yeah.
And I think that, we may often pride ourselves of, suddenly think of a brilliant joke that makes everyone laugh, or any other kind of idea. And we kind of pride ourselves on originating our own thoughts. But I think that's only part of the story. And that what is happening is that unembodied or disembodied beings are coming into our mental space all the time. I know how mad this sounds, but it is something that all these religious and spiritual traditions have been telling us throughout history.
Absolutely. There were a couple other things that I found fascinating, and then going to bounce around. One was that the origins of the Cinderella story can be tied to, at least, there's probably an older story that's been lost to history, but Isis in her second search for Osiris, I think it was, basically joining well, I guess now it would be Jordanian. It wasn't Jordan then. Royal family to be a sort of a housemaid, and that's sort of the origins of Cinderella.
I think that that may be for another book, but I think that I love fairy stories, and they are steeped in esoteric lore.
Yeah, so
I suppose that one of the things that the great initiates have done throughout history, I think, is to invent symbols and stories which gently and unobtrusively push us in the direction of a more spiritual understanding of life. And another thing is, I think that children probably experience spiritual beings and spiritual reality much more vividly than we do as adults. I think we gradually filter it out. We're kind of partly taught to filter it out, and don't talk about your imaginary friend, that kind of thing.
Well, my ghost story is mine was secondhand. The first hand was, basically somewhere between infant and toddler child. So he was the first-hand witness, but he doesn't remember it now because he's almost 24. But speaking of that, not of that, of what you were talking about before, with some of the esoteric adepts fit these things into their works. I have heard Shakespeare stories before, and I've always sort of brushed them off. But after listening to your book the second time, I am convinced that Sir Francis Bacon was Shakespeare. And I heard that Shakespeare wasn't necessarily considered all that bright, and he wasn't all that well thought of. And Bacon was basically like what we would call now a polymath. Basically like Da Vinci plus, the Renaissance art side of it. Or maybe, Da Vinci, well, he had the arts too. He just didn't write. Maybe he did, who knows. But so much with the numerology in Bacon, and once again, our friend 33 comes in, just like Jesus' age was 33, and the 33 degrees of the Grand Masonry, and of course there's a whole line of research into the 33rd and 33rd or third parallel latitude on Earth, which that one I'm not so sure about, but that. Do you remember that line? What it was with Bacon and Shakespeare?
Yes, I think that there is a very big and mysterious connection between Francis Bacon and Shakespeare, and we touched on Francis Bacon earlier because he invented the scientific method. The experimental method. And so, he is ultimately responsible in human terms for the materialism we have today, although that's not what he intended, I'm sure. It would be like blaming Jesus Christ for the Inquisition or Nietzsche for the Nazis. But so that was his great influence on human history. I think that Shakespeare, on the other hand, perhaps more than anyone apart from Jesus Christ, opened up the idea of the interior life, and he shone a light on it. He gave us all a sense that we have a wonderful interior life that can be described in beautiful language, and so he did more than anyone since Jesus Christ to illumine the idea of subjective experience. So here you have these two characters who I don't know that they inhabited the same physical body. I think I probably don't believe that. But in the sense we were just talking, we were just talking about not having to narrow a sense of human identity.
I don't know.
I think there was a connection there. I think that an extraordinarily high-level spiritual being was in England at that time and just took human history and twisted it.
Well, you point out that the numerology has Bacon as equaling 33, and that several of the phrases in a bunch of Shakespeare's forewords equaled 33. But the one that got me is the one that seems the least esoteric of them all, is that poor little Bacon, when he was a little fat kid, used to get picked on by the other kids, and they would call him Hamlet because he was a little piggy because they played on his last name, and that sounds exactly what kids would do. And of course, you might turn that into a character as opposed to being a small place of Hamlet, which is what it's. I don't know if they were called Hamlets then or if we adopted it afterwards, but I don't know. That was fun.
Shall we just touch on the Antichrist?
Sure, let's just touch on the Antichrist if you can.
Because we just touched on the idea of a very high level spiritual being,
sure,
coming down to earth and becoming embodied in one, maybe two bodies. I think it's interesting to talk about that because it is end times is a big topic at the moment, isn't it?
It certainly is.
Particularly, I think, would I be using the right word if I said evangelical circles?
I would say that you. I would say that even people who wouldn't identify as evangelicals are accepting evangelical ideologies.
Okay. Well, the secret history has something to say about this. The secret history, in broadest outline, is about human beings descending into matter, becoming enveloped into matter, getting deeper and deeper, sinking deeper and deeper into matter, and then at a certain point rising up again. Now, the impulse for rising up again, although it took things like this take a long time to manifest. The impulse for the coming up again was the incarnation of Jesus Christ. There is a tradition that just as Jesus Christ was an incarnation of God, that the devil will reincarnate.
Right.
And there is a tradition which runs through the epistles of St. John, Thessalonians, various writings by saints in more recent times, the Russian writer Dostoevsky, and the Austrian philosopher Rudolf Steiner, that the time for that incarnation of Satan is round about now.
Right.
And the reason and his mission is said to be to try to really press home that materialism and to squeeze out the little that's left of the spiritual in humankind, so that we become like machines.
Right.
And we don't have to have. We could have achieved magnificent things without having a wonderful internal life and a wonderful subjective life and the ability to conceptualize. We could have built Manhattan in the same way that termites build a mound. We could go to the moon using that unreflective intelligence. I suppose it's an intelligence that these days we would compare with artificial intelligence.
Yeah, definitely.
Extremely intelligent, but not having some of the features of our consciousness that we like to delight in. So, so what the legends say is that he will appear as a benefactor. He will appear in a time of trouble. He will seem to be able to do miraculous things, but then will be able to show that he can achieve these purely by materialistic means.
Right.
And this will be, the aim will be that this is another huge blow to spirituality. Because, again, it's saying, look, science is all there is. And I have a dear friend, an Irish woman who is fantastically gifted, and she tells me that it's very difficult for high-level beings like this to incarnate, and the Antichrist tried to incarnate several times and failed, but that he is here now. So I've no idea
who he is,
I
or she.
Who he is, but you know, there's something to look out for, maybe.
Well, it makes sense there would be an Aquarius, because Aquarius is the water sign, and water has always sort of been associated with the chaos and the dragon, and so I guess it would make sense. Speaking,
but these things are not. This is nothing to do with the end times, because in the esoteric history, the sinking in matter began about 10,000 BC. That's when matter became dense in the way we experience it today, and it will only begin to dissolve in about 8,000 years' time. So the people who think that the apocalypse is going to happen next week, that according to esoteric traditions, that's way off mark.
So around 10,000 years ago is sort of around where humans almost majority started adopting farming and basically civilization. So civilization is its own end game, I guess, is sort of part of the ethos. I do want to go into, because you had pointed out that there were a lot of the original, the esoteric traditions sort of recognize certain elements of science without calling them that. The evolution, in that some of the first gods were depicted as basically mermen. Dagon in the Babylonian, the Dogon tribe, which, I mean, I can't get over the coincidence of the pronunciation. They said that people came from the stars and taught them about Sirius, and that they were basically half man, half fish. You pointed out that the earliest depictions of not just Poseidon, but also Zeus and Hades and other gods were basically mermen. I don't know if I've just stolen all your thunder, so I'm going to shut up and
no,
let you pick it up.
I think it's a very interesting area of thought, and I think that what so if matter finally clicked into place about 10,000 BC, when we think the Sphinx was built, before then, the sort of metamorphosis described in myths happened much more easily, because things weren't solid in the way they're solid now. And I suppose what we're looking at with gods and goddesses having forms or part forms, which we now see in biological life, is that this is an example of mind coming before matter. That they were kind of thoughts of God, which were later realized in matter.
I think I understand. And also, one of the more popular sort of conspiracies of thoughts now is that we live in a matrix. And you sort of explain how the Rosicrucian and the chemical wedding and alchemy sort of theorize this as well, maybe not as literally as people take it now, that they actually think that we're living in someone else's video game. But can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, I think that yeah, I would say that modern science, if you look at say string theory, which is the most which is the theory. Not all scientists agree with it, but it's the most highly regarded of the proposed theories of everything. If you look at string theory, it has in it something called the holographic principle, and that is, it proposes that the three-dimensional world and the world traveling forward through time, which we perceive through our senses, is an illusion in the same way that a hologram is an illusion. This is the standard scientific view now, that the world perceived by our senses is in a way an illusion.
Well, it is.
There is something else going on behind it. So in that way, modern science is saying something that religion has always said.
Yeah, I mean, and it's true. I mean, something as simple as people who have color blindness, they see red is green and green is red, or whatever particular. Yeah. People who hear things differently, and you're right, it is all perception on how our particular brains interpret things.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think there are individual biases and colorings, but I think there's also a species one.
For sure.
You know, scientists, physicists now know that there isn't one big universal now in the universe. There are lots of different nows all over the place, and that you may be able to go through a different time, through a wormhole, and that scientists now believe, well, have believed for decades, that there are symmetries in time, just as there are symmetries in space. Well, if it's the case that something that happens now is symmetrical with an event in the future, that means the future is already fixed in some way. And that means that ancient religious teachings on destiny, well, perhaps now we can begin to describe those for the first time in science.
Right. The Norns theory is going to become not a theory, I suppose. There was one other trinity of sorts I wanted to talk about. Then I want to hit you with one last thing, and then whatever you want to talk about, or if you need to go. But one was of sulfur, mercury, and salt, each representing different stages of enlightenment or maybe matter solidifying.
That's a tough one, actually, Jeff.
I know, that's why I question about it.
That is connected with the fact that, this is difficult stuff, that we humans have, perhaps uniquely in the universe, or maybe aliens have it, we don't know, but I think that gods and angels don't have it. We have a capacity for conceptual thought. You know, these lovely intellectual conversations we've been having, that's an example of something that, as far as we know, only humans can manage. Mm-hmm. But there is a disadvantage to that, which is that when we engage in this kind of conceptual thinking, we are engaging in what's called the death process.
Okay.
The human being is a sickly animal because it can think in that way. And in alchemical thought, thinking is head salt.
Gotcha.
Can I leave it at that?
Sure, of course. I mean, listen, they don't even have to read the book. They can listen to it. And the last thing is, at some point in the book, you said that if you study the esoteric traditions, this will basically tell you why things are going east, and that why Russia is so important right now in esoteric traditions. And I think that's especially interesting right now because we're recording June 9th, 2024. There's a lot of saber rattling from Russia, and of course they've invaded their neighbor and sometimes part of the same nation, Ukraine, and the world is worried about that. But I'm more interested in what the esoteric line of thinking with Russia is, and why it's so. I mean, this is a tangent, I think. I mean, we see like the Pope Francis, a lot of people like him, a lot of people don't like him. And I think your comments on the Church of England was similar. You have religions trying to be adaptable and modernized to current mores and norms, but they are definitely institutions that aren't very adaptable. They're not supposed to adapt. You can't be uppercase Catholic if you're not lowercase Catholic to an extent. And that's a conundrum. But I don't know something about the Eastern Orthodox religions or Russia, or if any of that's related at all to what you were writing about.
Well, I wish I could look at Russia now and see some encouraging signs. I mean, I suppose what I would say is that the Russians have traditionally been a wonderfully, beautifully spiritual nation. Some of the great spiritual writers, like I've already mentioned Dostoevsky, who had an extraordinary kind of prophetic vision of where the human soul was going to go in the 20th century. Some of the greatest esoteric thinkers have come from Russia, and it's a country of extremes, isn't it? One could look at I'm not going to offend everyone now. You could look at Germany and say the same. Mm-hmm. I think there is. I think that if you look at a nation, I'm not going to speak about America. It's not my place. But I would say that if you look at Britain, Britain is the place where the scientific method was invented. It's where empiricism comes from. It's very measured. It's commonsensical. Common sense comes with all of that. There's a system of sets and balances, and all that's very good. It carries with it dangers of being a bit kind of plodding and boring, maybe, a bit middle of the road. You can look at other nations which have been far more driven by idealism, like Germany and Russia, and they've, because of idealism, that's inspired extraordinary art, literature, music particularly in the case of Germany. But there aren't those checks and balances.
Right.
It can tip over into something quite awful.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of populism on the rise, and some of it, for whatever reason, has adopted Russia as sort of being the modern soldiers of Christ, and some of it is because they're completely politically incorrect and sort of anti-woke, and I get that. I don't get it to the extreme of going all the way on the other side into totalitarianism. I mean, let the market handle most of the wokeness. I mean, Disney's certainly, losing money hand and over foot on things. Anyway, but so it's just the history of it being sort of a spiritual place, but maybe it sort of is the final frontier of Europe, Eurasia that is, largely steeped in mystery, I guess.
Yes, yeah. I don't understand this at the moment, Jeff.
That's okay. That's fine. People, like I said, people can read the book.
That's just an expression of regret. I wasn't blaming you for.
That's okay.
Wow, we've covered an amazing amount of topics.
We sure have. And I know that we've gone over an hour, which was sort of supposed to be our limit. I'm glad you're still holding up without complaint, but I'm sure that you're starting to get. So was there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to touch on that we did that I didn't get to, and or otherwise, for you to promote your works and your stuff?
No, thank you. I think I would just like to say I've really loved talking to you.
Thank you.
Genuinely, and it's been very illuminating. And I'm working on another book now called The Secret History of the Universe.
Awesome.
And I'd like to request that when, or if that ever gets published, that I could come onto your show and talk to you about that.
Request granted. And even if it doesn't get published, if you ever want to come back and talk about things, request granted. So, okay. Yeah. But yeah, Secret History. So everyone, The Secret History of the, let me get the title. What's the title again? The correct title?
The Secret History of the World.
The Secret History, yeah, that's hard to remember. And then The Secret History of the Universe by Mark Booth. Do you want to be found and followed on social media?
Well, I'm not really keeping it up much at the moment. I'll ramp it up again when I've got a new book out. But it's J. Black author. As I said at the beginning, most of the world I'm Jonathan Black, which my son says sounds like a damn market stage magician's name, but there it is.
Well, also there's a comedic actor named Jack Black, so and
of course. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there was also a Jonathan Black back in the days of Our Lives when it was popular. But anyway, that's not. None of those things are important. I'm probably revealing too much about myself and my misspent youth.
I don't know. I know there was a Spanish adventure film which was about the Knights Templar, set in the Middle Ages, and that the villain in that book, which came out about a couple of years after my book was published there, who was an English, a sardonic Englishman, was called Jonathan Black. So I think I took that as a great tribute.
Excellent. Is there any song that you would like to be your outro?
You should have given me notice of that question.
I know.
I tell you what, one of the rock stars I worked with and who I loved as a child was Donovan.
Okay.
And so if it isn't too arcane, I would like Donovan's Catch the Wind.
Catch the Wind. You got it. I've used Atlantis before. I've used Pick Up Every 6th Season of The Witch. So Donovan, Catch the Wind, it is. You got it. Mark Booth, Jonathan Black, whichever you prefer to be known as today. Thank you so much for your time. I hope that the book comes out, and thank you for giving us your time, especially with the extraneous situation, which I'm not really going to talk about. But yeah, it was a pleasure, truly. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure for me too. Thanks very much, Jeff.
Thank you. All right, folks, and thank you all. And check out his stuff. Buy his books if you can, and take a look. Be on the lookout for the new book. And you'll hear from us again next week on Garden of Doom.
Of uncertainty, I want to be in the warm hold of your love and mine, to feel you all around me, and to take your hand along the sand. But I may as well try and catch the wind. When sundown pales the sky, I want to hide a while behind your smile and anything, 'twould make me sing. But I may as well try and catch the wind. When rain has hung the leaves with tears, I want you near to kill my fears, to help me to leave all my blues behind. For standing in your heart is where I want to be and long to be. But I may as well try and catch the wind. Try